Hello, my name is Lanecia Rouse Tinsley, and welcome to another session of Art of the City, a virtual contemporary arts education program sponsored by the Center for Engaged Research and Collaborative Learning at Rice University, where we partner with Houston-based artists to provide insight into their creative process, work, and artistic journey to enhance attention and approaches to addressing the social, cultural, political, historical dimensions of life lived in Houston. In this session, we're in conversation with Anne Soul Sister Johnson. Anne is an artist based in Northwest Houston who paints portraits with her feet. Yes, her feet. Born in London, England, and raised in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Anne is a graduate of Prairie View A&M University in Texas, where she now teaches, and received a BS in home economics. She also received an MA in humanities from the University of Houston Clear Lake, as well as an MFA from the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, with a concentration in printmaking. She has shown in galleries and museums across the US, including the Museum of Fine Arts Houston and the Museum of Printing History in Houston. She has also published several articles and has written and designed a number of books. After watching this conversation, we invite you to check out the art making prompt provided by Anne. The prompt is informed by her own process in hopes that it sparks your creativity and encourages you in your own exploration of contemporary social and political realities in your local context. Welcome, Anne, and thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I have been following your work for a few years now and have been so curious about your process. Your work is phenomenal and brilliant, and you are truly, you have contributed so much to the art culture of Houston. And so really honored that we're able to be in conversation and that you're willing to be a part of this project. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the love and the flowers.
For sure. Yes, for sure. For sure. So let's start at the beginning. I would really love to know, how did you, what has your artistic journey been like? How did you get to this moment that you are in now in your practice and work?
You know, it takes time. And patience, and you have to roll with the rejection letters because we all get them. But my mother is she's an artist. We had a show together at the Collective a couple of years ago.
Really?
Oh, she came for me. She was coming for me. I have 8 paintings. What you got? She came for me. But that was probably my favorite show of all time, showing with her. So she's always, she's an avid gardener to this day, total green thumb. She used to, because we were military, there was always something going on at the base. So she used to do ceramics and all that stuff. And it was always the Black figures, the afros. She even painted a Black Afro Jesus for the church, which they wouldn't hang on the wall. So she had to go back and paint the white Jesus, which is still up there right now.
Oh, that's a story. Yeah.
I wish I could find that Black Jesus. It was big afro. But so that was the roots of my energy. But I never thought I would be an artist. It was fashion. I was afraid to major in art because I was in Wyoming and doing all of those art competitions. It's like the rodeo here. They're doing cows and boots and I'm drawing Tina Turner and Prince. So I could never place. So I went to fashion school for 2 years in Arlington. And then it was a 2-year program, then I was like, art is really my thing. But I thought I was going to be a fashion show coordinator for the Ebony Fashion Fair. That was like my goal in life.
Wow.
But then, I came back to my natural talent. So when I got to Prairie View, there was nothing they could teach me in terms of fashion because I went to a concentrated school. So I was literally teaching illustration classes for scholarship money there. So I took that time then to say, let me focus on the art. And that's when I was really developing my foot painting. That's where Soul Sister comes from, SOLE. So I did that. I've kind of grown up out of that. I don't do it anymore. And then I did basketball hoops for like 5 years. That's all I could see. And that's what these beaded pieces are backboards. And then Lauren Kelly was a curator at Prairie View. And she said, I had to get my MFA. You know how it is in academia. I needed my terminal degree. And so the Academy of Art, I could work with them because I didn't have to leave my job. And so it worked out fine, but they didn't know where to put me. They were like, I can't put you in painting because you're too stylized and that's not going to work here. Why don't we put you in sculpture? And I was the first online MFA at that school. So I was like, their sculpture had welding and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to blow up my house, fooling with these people. So I'm talking to Lauren. I was like, I don't know what to do. She's like my mentor. She was like, well, try printmaking, learn a skill. And I was like, okay. And then that's how, because I was afraid of printmaking. I don't like playing with acid and stuff like that, but everything is green now. So that brings me to where I am now. And I was so fortunate. I think everybody in their lifetime has one professor that sees that in them. And I was an older student, and she let me fly. And I graduated without doing a single edition because she thought I wasn't going to do it. And she just let me fly, and she walked me through the feathers. First thing strange that I printed on was a corn husk, which honored my great grandmother, who was Black Indian. And then I went from corn husk to feathers, feathers to leaves, leaves to cotton. And so it just, I'm still learning. I just like to push the boundaries of printmaking.
And you push them. I mean, because normally, when we think of printmaking, I think initially we think paper. And I don't think I've ever seen your work on paper.
No.
No.
That's our rude joke, right? So I always say, I don't print on paper, and Delita's always over there rolling her eyes. I mean, the only time that I had printed on paper for school was when I made the paper, because I find making paper very meditative.
Okay.
And then that got boring. So no, there's very few. Anything that I printed on paper might be a test print, but nothing that I would show or anything like that.
So how do you choose the materials that you print on, your surfaces?
Well, in the beginning, it was genealogy and ancestry, because I was just obsessed with this image of my great grandmother, who was clearly a Black Indian, and she had the long braids, and they called her Indian Emma when she was, back in the day, they called her White Emma because she was so fair skinned. So we had this picture of her in the house with her braids and one of those old long dresses. And now that I look back on it, I think that's all I printed was the 2 pictures of her. And printing it on that corn husk was that first itch, trying to do something different, but something to honor her. Mm-hmm. And then printing her on the leaves, that African ancestry, Native ancestry, American, it's all mixed up. So when I started playing with leaves, it was like the family tree, right? And it was just literally, it's just like when I painted with my feet, I stepped in some paint and thought it was cool. I was like, oh, that's kind of dope. I had to remember the Mickey Howard hairstyle, the Gumby that the girls wore. Going up and to the side. Yeah. It was perfect for a footprint. As you know, as an artist, accidents are your best friend, and curiosity. So, I think the first leaf that I printed on was like a bay leaf. I was in the grocery store looking for corn husks, and there were bay leaves there. So I said, well, let me try that. And it printed well because the bay leaves were dried out. Then I tried different leaves, and it was a lot of trial and error. The sycamore leaf and the magnolia are like velvet on the back. So they absorb the ink just like a paper would. And so I stick with those 2 leaves. So I literally go leaf hunting. I just walk around. I pick up the cam is a great leaf spot. There's great leaves right in front of the cam. I'll pick them up. If the back of it is the right texture, then I'll print on them. Cotton is a whole other story.
And also we'll have photos of your work so that people can
Okay.
see the various surfaces. And I am curious about your relationship to the land and how your art practice, because you're mentioning like leaves and corn husks and cotton, like all of these materials that there's a direct link to the land. And I'm curious if that process of creating on the material has formed and shaped that in any way.
It's funny that you can say that because I'm in an article now with the Mid-Atlantic Printing Journal. And that is the topic, is the environment. But I've never looked at it that way. Not that I'm opposed to, environmental health, but I've always looked at it more towards ancestry. That organics, the roots of our folk. And so up until recently, I never really thought about it like that, but everybody's going to view things differently. And in a sense, it does represent the land, because you think of corn husk and what happened to the Native Americans in this country. And, there's a powerful statement just in that,
Yeah. So your materials have changed and your processes have changed through your artistic journey. I'm curious about the questions that you bring to your art and the subjects that you address. Like, has there been kind of a common thread theme through your work, or that you're trying to, or you're saying in your work? I'm just curious.
Well, all of my work is going to address something in the Black community, because that's just who I am. My father, I was one of those born activist kids. They had to create a position for my father in the Air Force called social actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they created this position for him. So he was the one that spearheaded the Martin Luther King celebration in the state of Wyoming and all of that. So that's us. We marched every Martin Luther King Day. So, the early stuff, it was about my family, but those issues, just researching your ancestry as African Americans, you stop when you get to the plantation. You don't know, I called some pieces, or maybe from here, because I don't know what part of Africa, if from Africa, we all come from the continent, but there's so much that I don't know. So a lot of the works were created through questions. Like my thesis was called "It's the Not Knowing That Burns My Soul," SOLE. So it's the not knowing that just had my curiosity, particularly about my father's side and his great grandmother. Somebody in the family says, well, she was stolen from an Indian reservation. Okay, but she liked a brother. She married 3 Black men, but her first husband was lynched for passing for white. So all of those stories, I was able to create and deal with that through my work. It wasn't until our third Rouse show in 2013 that I broke away from the family. And that's the first time I even printed somebody outside of my family. And I did this series called Nesting. And it was that's the image that's on my website, the nest. And I was a student, and I just took some pictures of him, and he was really having a Beyonce moment, truthfully. He was just going like this. And those are still shots. And I printed those on feathers. And the idea was, this is in 2013, that students are nesting away because of technology. They do this so much that they're not aware of what's around them. So I had all of these nests, they suspended from the ceiling, and you could look up into them, and then you could see a figure on a feather. And so that was when I first started to stray away. And then in 2015, everything turned. When we were that's when the Converse Real Talk series started. And myself and Rabea and Delita, we were at Tougaloo Art Colony, of all places. Tougaloo Art Colony, one of the birthplaces, in Jackson, Mississippi. And my friend Frank, we were there as we were all of us were there as teachers. And each day you would have an artist presentation. And this particular day, my friend Frank from Memphis, he was doing his presentation and he stopped mid-sentence. He said, "Ann, what's going on at Prairie View?" I had no idea what he was talking about. He was talking about Sandra Bland. I had no idea because I wasn't at school. I was disconnected. My email wasn't on, and I checked, and that's when you start getting the messages, don't respond to the news stations or whatever. And from that point, I think my work has turned a little, well, not a little bit, but has totally turned towards art activism. It was always there in a sense, but it just really, it was just in my soul to continue to focus on that.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts around the concept of art activism.
So for me, like I said, activism is a part of who I am, just raised that way. But when I started doing the Converse Real Talk series, this is when we had a real president, when Obama was president. And, that's the beginning of people just being totally nasty online. All Trump did was just give them a license to be who they've always been, right? They don't have to hide anymore. But when it was Obama, they were, writing all these nasty things online. So I created Converse Real Talk and said, okay, well, do it face to face. So I'm gonna have these two chairs sitting here. You got something to say it to the person sitting in that chair. And then that's when I printed the images on the leaves. So somebody's always watching. And then I was able to take that to women and their work. And then I did the sunglasses are direct response to police brutality. The first one is Michelle Thibault's been my muse. She was singing Peace Be Still. And you know how animated she is when she sings. So I got really great shots. So she looked like a grieving mother. And then in the other lens was one of my students who looked like he had been slain. So, and then they're in the lens of mirrored aviator glasses, typically worn by law enforcement. So that really kind of spearheaded it. So for me, I do like to be conceptual though, when it comes to activism, because I want you to think about it. And the glasses make you think, because when I first showed them, they had text in the shadows. My beloved Heavy D, rest in peace. I was going to marry Heavy D in another life. But he sang a song called "You Can't See What I Can't See, You're Blind, Baby, You're Blind to the Facts." So I used that lyric to make people think you can't see what I can see. Mm-hmm. Then I started doing this series, You Can't See How You See Me. Because you can't. Because if you saw how you saw me, you wouldn't judge me. And I wouldn't be terrified for my life at a traffic stop. Right? And that goes to double consciousness.
Yeah.
As I tell my students, you better know how somebody sees you for your own protection. Mm. If that means turning down the music and listening to Elvis for 5 minutes, you do what you got to do. But you need to get home that day. Yeah. And so a lot of activism to me, it doesn't have to be a mural. Nothing against murals, because I think they're fabulous. I wanted to be a graffiti artist in my former life, but I couldn't hang. They told me I was too slow. They were like, Kid Styles was like, you gotta run. I was like, okay then. But, activism, it's people, sometimes just want to say, oh, that mural, that's activism, but it's more than that. You look up Hank Willis Thomas does fantastic works that make you think. I think art activism is something that makes you think, sit there and think about it. The Converse Real Talk, you had to sit there and talk to somebody face to face. And when it was at Women and Their Work, people would come on their lunch break to sit in those chairs and have a conversation. That's all I could ever ask for. The show that I did at Art League, I am a now retired curator because I can't anymore. I just can't. I can't run behind artists like that. It's just too much. But I did the show, How Do I Say Her Name? And I wondered I don't know if you got a chance to see that show.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Highly conceptual, extremely conceptual. And it made people think about women that at the time, and still not enough, we don't talk about. Lovey focused on the murder of trans women in shadows. Rebea's piece, she redid the Public Enemy, the anamorphic Public Enemy design. The piece that Monica Villarreal did was so, it was the only piece that was figurative. And it was a silhouette of Sandra Bland, and people literally wrote their experiences on the wall. I can't say enough about Kaneem Smith. Total fan of Kaneem Smith. And the piece that stunned me the most was Autumn Night. And it was just a video. I had to walk away when she sent it to me on the phone, and Kaneem and I were installing, and I was like, oh, Autumn's piece is here. So Jenny was, Jenny is okay, we'll put up, Jenny, we'll put it on the monitor. And I was like, and Kaneem and I were both like, it stopped me in my tracks, because it was about her going to Prairie View for her interview. It was just words. And it was to Alice Coltrane. And it ended with, I'll call you when I get home. And, that whole idea of that process, if that tugged at me, it tugged at someone else. And the piece that I did, again, I don't like to be extremely direct. I like you to think and to be more conceptual. I printed out her traffic ticket. The paperwork was 26 pages for a traffic stop. 26 pages. And she cussed him out good before more power to her. But it was 26 pages, and then just embossing that word by word on the glass, it was pretty explosive, And so I just try to be, for me, the more powerful pieces of art activism are the most conceptual pieces. This goes back to David Hammons. I like to refer to him as my art uncle. When he did In the Hood, which was just a floating hood. And I showed that on my first day of class, and the students were like, Trayvon. I was like, no. That was done in 94. So let's talk about what he means by the hood. Who's in the hood, living in the hood, or what happens when you wear a hood. So, yeah. Oh. I hope I answered your question. You
did. And in answering it, you shared some insight in your process that I didn't know. You photograph some of the subjects in your work, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were the photographer of the photo, because I did have some questions about images, and what that process is like for you in choosing the images that you do. Are there certain, is there any wisdom you have to offer us with regards to copyright negotiation or asking permission? How does that process work for you?
I'm upfront. I pay in art. Hey, it's a $1,200 feather.
Yes.
Yeah, I pay in art. That's the beauty of printmaking. Most of the models, and the other beauty of printmaking is you could use that same plate for years. I finally had to retire Michelle's plate. 2 plates I had to retire. Michelle Tebow and Autumn Night. I mean, they were just beautiful plates, but I was like, you know what? I need to let these rest. When Awakenings with Marlon was at the studio by the old Sears, it's the funkiest group of people you can ever meet in one place.
Beautiful. Yes.
And I call it the Church for Creative Misfits, right? So I would just announce, they would have announcements, and I would say, hey, I'm going to be taking pictures after church. And everybody be like, okay, cool. So that's, I got Suber and Ella, from Crumpville.
Yes.
Michelle, Nine, I don't even know Nine's real name. Nine the poet, Bean, Outspoken Bean. Yeah. Everybody was there. Russell, Marlon, and I would just take their pictures. So there's a particular way I like them to stand sideways and look down. And other than that, I'm not the photographer Rebea is. I don't want my picture to be perfect, because I don't want the print to be perfect. And it's the same with a couple of students, by then they beg and they so desperate to pass the class. I'm like, okay, let's work this out. But that's a joke. I don't really do that.
Right.
But I do, recently, couple of the recent prints were images that are out there, like of Delia, the slave girl Delia, and I probably won't print her too much anymore because I know her family is trying to get the rights to that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because Harvard owns those pictures. But Carrie Mae Weems used them first. Right. From here, I saw what happened and I cried. And, that's where I first became aware of those images.
Okay.
So I photograph models, but I do pull images as well.
Okay. What's a good art day? What's the good day in the studio for you? What does that look like?
I can get up and just work and not have to do anything else. Work until the crack of dawn, sleep in, get up and do it again. That's a good day. Not being distracted with anything. That's a good day for me. I'm one of those people, if I leave the house, I'm messed up for the day. When I'm ready to work, I need to be ready to work. I can't run to Texas art or anything like that. I'll just be thrown off. And then I might not get going again until midnight. I love to work through the night though, until the sun comes up.
Really? Wow.
Sometimes.
What begins the work for you? Like, do you have a routine that helps you enter into the creative process? Or
I dream most of my stuff. I dream it. And then I dream of the concept, then I write it down. My sketchbook has more words than illustrations, which is funny because my art mama in my head, Betty Saar, because I do believe I'm the lost Saar daughter. She don't know it. That's when I started printing on cotton. I met Allison Saar. Totally fan.
wow.
She was so cool. Touched her hand. And and that's when I started doing cotton. Because she was at a printmaking conference. She was the keynote. And they had a solo exhibition for her. And I expected to see her prints, but not her sculptures. And her sculptures were there with the cotton and the topsy-turvy and the tin and all of that. And I was like, oh my God. And I sat there and I looked at it. I was like, I should print on cotton. I'm gonna try cotton. That's literally how that started. And then I was also at the time studying gynecology and Black women, history of gynecology, and the butchering of Black women.
And that's where the Delia image.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's where the Delia images came in. Yeah.
Okay.
So literally I have to write things down. And if it's been a minute, I just know that I'm transitioning to something new. Like I have something, in here right now that when I get it to the surface, I'm going to love it. It's going to be powerful. People view it how they view it, but that's really my process. I dream it, write it down, and then get through the technical parts.
Who are some of your influences, like inspirations?
Oh, I have my tribe is my art mama, Betty Saar, my sister, Allison. Loved it. My uncle, David Hammonds. Radcliffe Bailey. I met him. He must have thought I was stone cold crazy. He came to the MFA. This is when he was married to Drusilla, Victoria Raoul. So everybody was flipping out over her because Drusilla was in the house. Yeah. And I remember I went to him and I was like, I think I'm your soulmate. And he was like, this girl is just crazy, because when I saw his work, it's shadow boxes. And I think of everything as a shadow box. Like this clock behind me, that's a shadow box. Everything, all these shadow boxes are behind me. So I see everything as a shadow box because that's how I house my pieces. What Deborah Roberts is doing is insane right now. I can't wait to get up there to see that show. Yeah.
Me too. I'm ready. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not just one person for me. Depending on what I'm studying or what I'm, about to do. I'm always heavy on Betty Saar though, because she was a printmaker too. You see her assemblages, but don't realize how strong of a printmaker she was. But her and Allison, I would say right now, well, no, always, because I met both of them. So.
Oh, that's so good. Do you think about legacy, Anne? And if you do, what would you like for your legacy to be as an artist?
I'm a Scorpio, so that's all we think about. Well, I tell my students all the time, hopefully if you don't learn anything else from me, you learn to look into a piece of work, not at it. Don't look at the work, look into it. my legacy as an artist, I would hope that people would look at my work in history and say, this is somebody who was not afraid to push the boundaries, who acknowledged the artists around her, embraced them, Faith Ringgold, Michelle Barnes, locally, understood the help that was around them and the support, and gave back. Giving back is not for everybody. Everybody's not meant to do that, but I'm one of those people who does, so, I hope that would be, visually my artistic legacy is she was not afraid of nobody. She just did her thing. And if it was in a museum, it was. If it wasn't, oh well.
And thank you.
Oh,
This is such a treat to be with you and appreciate the conversation.